Okay, so I'm not going to talk much about the Second Great Awakening, and it's really is something that happened a little earlier than the time period that we're talking about. What I wanted to mention, though, is I go back to the religiosity of American life, okay, and the fact that there have been these waves of religious revivals, mainly, if not solely, through what we would call the Protestant tradition, okay. Um, and this actually affected many blacks and even Native Americans in terms of responses to these things. Now, this switches me into the next phase when I talk about Jefferson and religion, and this has been a controversial topic. You'll notice that I have a clip about the Jefferson Bible that the Smithsonian has, and I don't see it up anymore, but there used to be a documentary that really kind of went into long details about Thomas Jefferson's methodologies and how he actually edited his Bible. And the debate centers on this, of whether or not he cut out the miracles to merely make a moral treatise, which this gentleman says here, which I'll show you in a second, or did he simply see that as truly superstitious, the stories in the New Testament that have the miracles, and he cut them out for that reason. So actually, let me back up and restate. Jefferson, right, takes the Bible and he takes a razor blade and he sits down on his desk and he cuts out with the razor blade sections of the New Testament where he just leaves like the teachings mainly of Jesus Christ, and he wants to put it in chronological order, right? And have the moral teachings of Jesus put into a book. Now, again, was he doing this to simply emphasize, like to have an easy go-to book that would get you right away into the ideas of Jesus, or would you, or was it because he truly saw those things as superstitious? Well, the fact of the matter is, if you look at the textbook, Thomas Jefferson was always seen as a type of heretic. His support of the French Revolution made him very controversial. I think that it's fair to say that the consensus of historians agree that he was a deist, that he did believe in a God. He believed in religion as a kind of necessary social construct. I would argue that he actually valued the teachings of Jesus, but I think that if we really pinned him down to his religious views, he was doubtful of supernatural experiences, metaphysical ideas, and he may have doubted the idea of there being a personal God in the way that Christianity normally teaches. I think that he would be considered a heretic according to standard Christian religion. Now, there's a group named Wall Builders, and they're a conservative group that tries to help preserve the ideas about the Constitution and the Founding Fathers that traditionally were the traditional views. They want to uphold the Founding Fathers and the legacy of this country as a positive thing and as a God-directed thing, even going that far. So I have this little clip. I'll just show you very little of. I'll skip around just because I'm just exposing you to the different views. But to say, I think the Smithsonian is correct, and I think that part of where there's a debate about what this gentleman's thoughts are, he's convinced that because Thomas Jefferson supports missionaries and supports the conversion of Native Americans to Christianity, that shows he actually believed in Christianity. I think it's naive, and it's also not taking in context of what we've just been talking about earlier, which is that Christianity was seen as a European religion that was civilizing. There was that view. That doesn't mean that you believe it's actually the literal truth of God. And I think that sometimes people forget that when it comes to the way you look at spirituality, you can look at things from a wide range of views, right? Okay. So anyhow, I'll just give you a short little clip here.
My good friend David Barton is here. He has a new book out called The Jefferson Lies, exposing the myths you've always believed about Thomas Jefferson. He's also the founder and president of Wall Builders, and Wall Builders has done exceptional work in this country. And then David, if we save, no, let me rephrase that. When we save the country, a lot of that credit in the afterlife, I think, is going to go to you. You and your wife Cheryl are amazing, and your staff at Wall Builders. You have been fighting this fight for a long time, and I'm going to share with the audience in a couple of weeks a timeline idea that came to me, and I think this has happened several times in the last 200 years, and it's always saved by the same kind of people holding up the founders. Cool. And I feel it's the same. It's a slave, so, back then, Jefferson, and it's funny because as I started reading the founders, I fall in love with each of them, and then I find another one, and, while I'm reading that one, I'm like, this is my favorite. Yeah. And then I read the other one, and I'm like, no, he's not as good as this one. This one's really good. Jefferson, I think, was the first founder that I fell in love with. And then I had a problem with him because of Ellis, American Sphinx. Yeah. I started looking at him, and I'm like, and my excuse on the Sally Hemings thing was a slave, so, back then you would have viewed things as, you would have viewed people as things, and it was a piece of furniture, and so what difference did it make? And I was so confused by that, because here's a guy who's writing, we hold these truths to be self-evident, and it didn't match. And so I was really confused, and I put Jefferson kind of away, which is dangerous, because he's critical. Yeah, he is. So, which is why he's so easy to, why he's such a high-profile target to attack. Right. Because those ideas, when you get those ideas, you get limited government, you get inalienable rights. You got to get rid of him if you want to move in a progressive direction. Do you agree that he is the most complex, the hardest one to understand? I don't think he's the same kind of drive. They're ignoring all of this correspondence. They're ignoring everything that he wrote, which is
okay. So, just to give you some, you can take a look at this all on your own if you want to look up the link. Again, I disagree. I think this gentleman is making a kind of desperate. He's holding on to a Jefferson that he wants to have and hold on to, and apologizing for slavery in a way that I don't buy into. But at the same time, he did bring up a lot of things in this discussion that I think the very idea of questioning if whether or not Jefferson was definitely cutting out the miracles as a kind of affront on the miracles of the Bible, or wanting to focus on the morality in his editing of the Bible. The gentleman makes some interesting points that I think should be taken note of. Ultimately, I'm exposing you to that. He criticizes the Smithsonian's interpretation. I have you give a little clip on that. And, this legacy of Jefferson is an interesting one. And as you see in the textbook, has been around since Jefferson was around. Okay, so we'll go into that a little bit more again later as well. Also, what do we have in the background? We have the background of technology in America. The cotton gin, as we realized, was transforming Southern life, really helping slavery take off in the agricultural sector. Okay. There was also the development of the textile industry in the North, and weapons productions increased, which of course obviously will have an effect on things later on. Eli Whitney, of course, is the one who invented the cotton gin. Okay, so I'm just going to move on from there. Jefferson the president. So I've already talked about many of these points discussing. He believed in the drastic reduction in power of national institutions, and he did just that. He disregarded courtly etiquette. Remember I told you he kind of tries to play off like he's the anti-aristocrat while he lives very aristocratically, okay? He owned more than 100 slaves, and when you read that article from the Smithsonian on the dark side of Thomas Jefferson, it's pretty empirical. You need to read the whole thing, but he didn't free his slaves when even a Polish noble offered to buy their freedom. And on death, not only did he not set his slaves free, married couples, families were torn apart at the slave block, at the auctions. Okay, his view about them is, when you read it, it's heartless. to be blunt. Okay? There's no other way to say it. And any excuse for it, that's fine. But you can say, was he a man of the times? Well, a lot of people at that time thought that that wasn't good behavior. Many Christian abolitionists, people against slavery who were religious, they were men of the times as well. They would have saw that as a terrible behavior. Do we accept him having that? Well, then the other question is, does that then erase his other legacy, which might be a more insightful and thoughtful, reflective view about the way governance should be, right? And for me, as a person who's in the history and at one time was a philosophy major, I can look at someone's legacy and like one part of their legacy and dislike another. That's just me, okay? Anyways, so he was a great writer, great thinker, but he was not a great speaker, okay? He was actually a scientist in many sense. Carl Sagan once mentioned the famous, the late astronomist Carl Sagan said he was probably our last scientific president that actually knew science. It'd be interesting to see where he would be on the debate of, let's say, climate change right now. And as I mentioned, he idealized farm life over urban centers and international trade. He was kind of an isolationist, a localized guy. Okay, and these are the fundamental aspects of his legacy, of his ideas. But it gets a little bit more complicated than that. So we'll move in next to Jefferson and the military and move forward from here in the next lecture.